Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Smooth Brain EDH, where we make the smoothest plays with the biggest brains. I hope you guys are excited, because it's time to play the Strixhaven precons. It took a little bit of work, but we managed to snag all 5, and today we've got 4 for you. Alright, let's jump in and see who's playing what. And first and foremost is Ethan on Zaffai. This precon is an Izzet Spellslinger deck. During some of its later turns, it can string together several different cards, and if you have Zaffai out, you're going to get a crazy amount of value. Ethan has always been our resident casual combo player, so this deck was perfect for him. Now let's see what his starting hand was. His hand consists of Command Tower, Forgotten Cave, Memorial to Genius, Izzet Boilerworks, Humble Defector, Talran Sky Summoner, and Pyromancer's Goggles. This is honestly the perfect hand for one of these precon decks. It's got enough lands to guarantee your commander coming out. And while the Defector isn't the best source of card draw, if you give it to someone who has a weaker start, you can stay ahead of them. Up next is Justin playing Willowdusk. This precon, as you can probably tell, synergizes a lot with life gain, and it can also work well with life loss too. And with all these synergies, it makes for some pretty cool play patterns. Now let's move on to his hand. Justin's starting hand is a Blighted Woodland, Swamp, Forest, Sun Droplet, Silver Smoke Ghoul, Healing Technique, and Mortality Spear. Also a pretty good hand, a decent amount of lands, with plenty of life gain and an interaction piece too. Alright, and up next is Cameron playing Osgir. This Boros precon is a really interesting artifact deck. Artifacts in graveyards have always kind of been a thing, but the fact that you can just double up any artifact in your graveyard with your commander is pretty powerful. And I hope none of the other precons come with graveyard hate. Now, let's get a look at his opening hand. He keeps a 7 of Secluded Steppe, Mountain, Mindstone, 1000-Year Elixir, Scrap Trawler, Losh Heal, and Wake the Past. Not a bad hand at all. Turn 2 ramp is always good and casual. And after that, he's able to cast most of the things in his hand. Let's just hope he makes his land drops so he can cast that Wake the Past. Alright, and finally, we get to Cody, who's playing Adrix and Nev. This commander is crazy if you ask me. It's a Parallel Lives in the command zone with Ward 2. The precon is already great being a token synergy deck, but imagine being able to upgrade this thing into something insane. I'm excited to see what this deck can do, so let's go ahead and look at his hand. And that hand consists of Oran Reef the Vastwood, Forest, Simic Signet, Guardian Augmenter, Crafty Cut Purse, Curiosity Crafter, and Master Biomancer. Honestly, good hands all around today. Another turn 2 ramp hand, and if he gets one more land, he can cast everything in his hand. Alright you guys, we've seen their hands and what they're playing. Let's jump straight into the game. Ethan wins the die roll and plays a tapped Memorial to Genius. He passes to Justin, who plays a Blighted Woodland and passes to Cody. Cody plays Oran Reef and passes to Cameron. Cameron plays Secluded Steppe and passes to Ethan. On his turn, Ethan plays Command Tower, taps for 2, and casts Humble Defector. He then passes to Justin, who plays a Swamp and casts Sun Droplet before passing to Cody. And while this is happening, Cameron is making a deal with Ethan to get the Humble Defector. Justin then passes to Cody. Cody drops a Forest and casts Simic Signet. After that, he passes to Cameron. Cameron plays a Mountain, taps for 2, and casts Mindstone before passing to Ethan. And on his turn, Ethan activates the Defector, drawing 2 cards and giving it to Cameron. He then plays Izzet Boilerworks, bouncing the Memorial to his hand, and then moves to discard, discarding the Memorial and Myriad Landscape. On Justin's turn, he plays a Forest, and then casts Rampant Growth, finding another Swamp to the battlefield tapped. He passes to Cody after that. And on his turn, Cody taps for 3, plays Simic Growth Chamber, bouncing his Forest, and then casts Guardian Augmenter. After this, he passes to Cameron. Cameron immediately activates the Defector. After drawing 2 cards, he taps for 3 and casts Burnished Heart, and unfortunately misses a land drop, having to discard a card and passes to Ethan. Ethan activates the Defector, giving it back to Cameron and drawing 2 cards. He then plays an island, and then taps for 4, casting his commander before passing to Justin, but he has to discard 2 cards first. Justin plays a Forest as his land for turn, then casts Arcane Signet. And not being a big fan of the not-so-humble Defectors, Mortality Spears the Defector. And then passes to Cody. Cody plays a Forest as his land for turn, then taps for 4, casting Master Biomancer. He then passes to Cameron, and Cameron immediately moves to combat, swinging 2 at Justin, but psych! He cracks it before damage, and finds a Plains and a Mountain to the battlefield tapped. Unfortunately, he does miss his actual land drop again and has to discard a card before passing to Ethan. Ethan starts his turn off with an island, then taps for 5 and casts Pyromancer's Goggles. He then moves to combat and swings one commander at Justin, who gets a counter on his Sun Droplet. He then passes to Justin. Justin plays High Market as his land for turn, and then taps for 4 to cast Well of Lost Dreams. After that, he passes to Cody. Cody plays a Rogue's Passage, and then just passes to Cameron. Cameron plays an Ancient Den, and then taps for 3 to cast Thousand Year Elixir. And it's now that we find out what Cameron's side of his deal with Ethan was, and he casts Secret Rendezvous, targeting him and Ethan. They each draw 3 cards, and Cameron says he has fulfilled his side of the deal, and it is over. He then passes to Ethan after discarding a card. Ethan plays his 5th land, which is Temple of the False Gods. Ethan then asks Cameron how many cards he has in hand, and casts Rousing Refrain, using Pyromancer's Goggles. Cameron has 7 cards in hand, so Ethan copies it and makes 14 red mana. He then also realizes he had 2 Magecraft triggers and scries 2 to the bottom and makes 2 4/4s. After that, he uses 4 mana to cast Stormkin Artist. After that, he taps 2 islands and uses 3 more mana to cast Metallurgic Summonings. After that, he casts Brainstorm. Ethan gets triggers on the stack, and at the side of a free treasure token, Cody flashes in Crafty Cut Purse. And so, he gets a treasure token and a 1/1 construct. Ethan resolves his Brainstorm, drawing 3 and putting 2 back. And Cody remembers that Master Biomancer makes the token come in with 2 1/1 counters. And not wanting to give Cody any more tokens to the Cut Purse, Ethan passes the turn to Justin. And on his upkeep, Justin uses Sun Droplet to gain a life, and then pays 1 to draw 1. He plays Witch's Clinic as his land for turn, then casts his Commander, and passes to Cody. Cody plays a Quandrix Campus as his land for turn, then taps for 5 to cast Nissus Expedition to find 2 basic lands to the battlefield tapped. He passes to Cameron after that, and Cameron decides it's time to cast Osgir. He then sacrifices Ancient Den, and then activates Osgir's ability, thanks to Thousand Year Elixir, to make 2 token copies of it. He then taps for 3 to cast Quicksmith Genius, then plays a Myriad Landscape and passes to Ethan. On his turn, Ethan taps for 7 using the Pyromancer's Goggles to cast Brass's Bounty. A lot of triggers enter the stack, and with no responses from anyone else, Ethan makes 14 treasures, 2 4/4s, a 7/7, and gets to scry 2. He uses 5 treasures after this to cast Creative Technique, demonstrating it targeting Justin. Ethan gets 2 copies of the spell, and Justin gets 1. He also gets 2 more 4/4s, 2 more treasure tokens, a 5/5, and 2 more scry 1s. After this, Justin exiles Vampire Nighthawk and casts it without paying its mana cost. And the 2 cards Ethan gets are Mindstone and Rutha. After this, he exiles 6 cards and taps for 2 to cast Dig Through Time. A bunch more triggers happen. He also bounces Rutha to copy it. Even more triggers happen, and long story short, he gets 2 more treasures, 2 more 4/4s, 2 more scry 1s, and an 8/8. And then finally, he gets to resolve 2 Dig Through Times. After that, he sacrifices a treasure to sacrifice Mindstone and draw a card. He then sacrifices another treasure to cast Soul Ring. And then, wanting to end his turn on a bigger bang than he's already done, he sacrifices all 9 of his treasures, taps Soul Ring, and casts Epic Experiment, X is equal to 9. His usual triggers enter the stack, except this time he gets to deal 10 to a random player. And the dice chooses Justin. And after this, Ethan exiles the top 9 cards of his library and gets to cast all instants and sorceries, CMC 9 or less. He gets 3 spells and casts Call the Skybreaker first. He then gets to counter the call with Reinterpret, and then casts Inspiring Refrain, drawing 2 cards. He resolves all of his Metallurgic Summonings and Magecraft triggers, and after the call is countered, Ethan casts Rionia Fire Dancer from his hand. He has cast 7 instants and sorceries this turn. In response to the Rionia, Cody cycles Tranquil Thicket. And so Ethan moves to combat and makes 8 copies of his 11/11 and swings them all at Cody because he stole his 1 treasure token and his 1/1 construct. And with no responses from anyone else, Cody is dead. Ethan passes to Justin after that, and Justin gains 1 life to Sun Droplet and draws a card off of his well. Justin asks what the biggest creature is, and Ethan starts going down the list. Justin then casts Reckless Spite, losing 5 life, destroying Ethan's commander and his artist. Justin then pays 1, activates his commander, and puts 5 counters on his flying Death Touch lifelinker. After this, he passes to Cameron. Cameron starts his turn off with a Steel Overseer. After that, he pays 3 mana and activates his commander to exile Scrap Trawler to make 2 token copies of it. And it is at this point that we realize they don't give you enough copy tokens and Cameron uses mirror tokens instead. He then discards a card to draw a card to Quicksmith Genius. Cameron then activates Steel Overseer to put a 1/1 counter on each artifact creature he controls. He then just passes to Ethan. And Ethan, with 4 treasure tokens and 5 artifact creatures, exiles Metallurgic Summonings to return all his instants and sorceries from his graveyard back to his hand. In response, Cameron dispatches Ethan's Riona. The ability still resolves though, and so Ethan recasts Brass's Bounty, copying it with the Pyromancer's Goggles, getting 14 more treasure tokens. And with all this mana, his hand being refilled with the same gas that got him to this point, and over 60 power on the board, everyone decides it's time to concede the game and move to the next one. And so, Ethan is our winner. Well guys, what'd you think? That game was pretty one-sided, was it not? It kinda goes to show that these precon decks aren't anything to scoff at. But I will say, Ethan had some pretty crazy draws. Pyromancer's Goggles into Rousing Refrain, and then using Pyromancer's Goggles and Brass's Bounty the turn after, that netted him crazy mana. And with his commander out and Metallurgic Summonings, the game was pretty much sealed then. Well, anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to like and subscribe. We also love hearing feedback from you guys down in the comments below. We're also considering upgrading these decks and playing them on camera as well. Let us know what you think about that. Also, be sure to check out our social media pages. Links will be down in the description below. And if you would, consider donating to us on our Ko-fi page. That link will also be down in the description. We're looking to get a new camera soon so we can upgrade our quality. Anyways, thanks again for watching. This has been Smooth Brain EDH, and have a smooth day.